But just to get going with Hillel, this is a little bit of background information. I'm on page 14 if you're using handouts. There were 5 zugot, which are like couples. It means one of them was the head of the yeshiva, another one was like the nasi, which is like kind of like the president, or like the governing force, but also not necessarily giving out the halachic guideline every time, but more just like a leader. And so Hillel and Shammai were a pair of zugot, and Hillel was the nasi, okay, in his time, and this was before the destruction, but up to 40 CE were the zugot. And then we enter into the Tanaim period. 70 CE was the destruction of the temple. Rabbi Akiva will be during that time period. Interesting to note that Hillel lived during the time of Herod. Herod. How do you pronounce it? Herod. And Herod. But how do you pronounce the name? Herod, right? Herod the king, and also in the time of Jesus. And so scholars like to point out parallels between Jesus's thought and Hillel's thought, which doesn't mean that Jesus took from Hillel, or it just means like Hillel was a spiritual leader in the time, and he was very influential. And Jesus was at that time, according to the New Testament, he was abiding by the laws overall, and he was influenced by Hillel's teachings in different ways. Academics might sometimes want to say the opposite, but.
There's an argument about really when this Yeshu guy, Josh, I mean, and he may or may not.
Interesting. So academic works seem to want to say that they lived in around a parallel time. So I don't know.
I know that.
Maybe the Talmudic Yeshu, those discussions around.
The Talmudic, there's 2 Talmudic Yeshus.
Yeah. Some say there's many, but that's for another class.
Well, Yeshu is Josh. So.
Okay. So for this class, I went through a few Sfarim. This is Adin Steinsaltz has a good review of like central sages, Talmudic images. It's called. This is a great work. Joseph Telushkin put out a work called Hillel, If Not Now, When. This is lovely. Very good review. Some reflections. He has last chapter. Last chapter too. One chapter is about like Jesus and Hillel, the parallels and the differences, and one chapter is about like how Hillel is relevant for us today, which I'm going to quote from that on our source sheet. So we'll hear from that. And then there's always this book, Benjamin Lau, which is a nice book. I have other ones too, but these are ones I found in the library here. This is a good one too. He goes through the sages. It's like a 3 or 4 volume set. It's lovely. Benjamin Lau. This is put out by Magi Press. It was originally written in Hebrew, but it's called The Sages. Okay, so let's start a little bit with Hillel. A little bit of background. So this is the connection to Rabbi Akiva. There were a few individuals in our history who lived the same amount of like time, who lived up to 120, and Hillel was one of them according to our tradition. And it says that Hillel Hazaken Alami Bavel. He came from Babylon at age 40, and he learned for 40 years, and he guided Israel for 40 years. Very clean, nice. Rabbi Akiva also learned Torah at age 40. I think he was an ignoramus till age 40. And then he learned for 40 years, and he taught for 40 years. Okay, so there's certain parallels between these figures. And when we get to Rabbi Akiva, we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's Moshe also, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Moshe was in Egypt for 40 years, in Midian for 40 years, and then he guided Israel for 40 years. So something about this, perhaps just some sort of, these are central leaders in our tradition. The 40 is like a full number. There's 40 in the Torah. He was Moshe was on Sinai for 3 groups of 40. Yeah, that's a complete. 120 is a complete number. Something about these characters, they're very complete. They live like a full life. So here are some teachings of Hillel. And these are all from Pirkei Avot. Okay, so here's a little exercise. The first part of the source sheet basically is like an introduction to Hillel. So let's think about together some characteristics of Hillel just from his teachings in Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is the Ethics of the Fathers, collection of ethical teachings of the sages of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, really. And let's think about, while I'm reading them, think or jot down or think about in your head, what are some traits that stand out? If you don't know anything about Hillel, just think about what stands out from these statements. First one is, be of the disciples of Aaron, a lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, one who loves the creatures and draws them close to Torah. So just let's mention it as an idea on this. There's a statement here: be a lover of peace and a pursuer of peace. I love this because it's one thing to love peace, like to speak about peace, to post about it, to say everyone wants to get along. It's another thing to pursue it, not just to love it, but to pursue it, to go actively and make sure that there's peace between people, to actively make sure the world's a more peaceful place. So it's not just about loving; it's pursuing it. So also here, one who loves the creatures and draws them close to Torah. So it's one thing to try to bring people close, but you have to love them. And sometimes you can just draw them close by loving them. You love them first, and then you draw them close. And that's a very important piece, because sometimes people try to convert others because they're frustrated with them, or they're angry with them, or they're annoyed by them. That's not the way. Love other people. And from that love should emerge your urge to draw them close. And perhaps through loving them, you will draw them close. And we're going to see that Hillel was very strong with that. Okay, let's see what else. The next one is, one who makes their name great causes their name to be destroyed. One who does not add to their knowledge causes it to cease. One who does not study Torah deserves death. One who makes unworthy use of the crown of learning shall pass away. So this first one's about loving each other, seeking peace. This one seems to be a lot about your name and one's name, like one's reputation, seeking honor, and also learning Torah. Those are some traits. This is a classic Hillel text. If I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am for myself, what am I? If not now, when? So basically he's saying, if I am not for myself, then who's going to be for me, right? This is actually a very relevant text for our times, I think, because if we're not, Am Yisrael is not for ourselves, no one's going to be for us. But if we're only thinking about that, and we're only thinking about ourselves, we're not thinking about our broader values, then we're going out to war without the right perception. So if I'm only for myself, what am I? Meaning our goal is to eradicate evil. Our goal is to manifest our lives in the land of Israel in a safe and healthy way for the betterment of humanity. And so that we should also keep that in mind. So we're not just for ourselves or for others, but you can only do it if you exist. And so we must fight for our existence. So those two components I think are valuable. Also, our Parsha talks about three angels came to visit Avraham in our Parsha. One told him that he was going to have a baby. Another one came to heal him because he had a brit milah. The other one was going to destroy Sodom. And so the commentators asked, why did that angel who was going to destroy Sodom come to Avram? Should have gone to Sodom. Right? Why did he go to Avram? The one who's going to heal him should have come to Avram. The other one who was going to tell him they're going to have a baby should be there. But why is that one's going to destroy Sodom? Why does he come to Avram? I thought maybe that he was going to destroy Sodom. There was destruction that needed to be done. And Judaism is not only about peace, it's also about there's a time for war, there's a time for peace. Now, when you're going out for war, you should remember also our values. I think that's why that destructive angel came to visit Avram first, came to be influenced by Avram's Abrahamic values, and only then went out to go to the destruction. We have to fight. That's to come from a place of our values, come for what we know, fighting for what we know is right. Yeah. That's our Torah for Shabbos. Okay. All right. Do not separate yourself from the community. Okay. So far we have, what would you say is a trait that stands out here? If not now, when? What was a trait that stands out here? What would you say?
Which one? If not now, when?
Not from this whole statement. What?
No, I was asking which.
This whole statement, 114. You could say on Zoom also, you can call. Or yeah, Lynn. Humility. Okay, how?
Well, I mean, you have to be for yourself. But if you're only about yourself, then you're not taking others into account.
Yeah.
So how can you be humble in the face of others if you don't respect yourself? And then it's not now.
What else wanna? Yeah.
In the first part, you have to advocate for yourself.
So what would you say?
If I
In
am not for myself,
Well,
I mean,
will be for me.
you have to put forth the effort. Hashem's in charge of the result.
Mhm.
You have to make the effort.
Okay,
I
so
thought the translation was if I'm only for myself.
it's not clear. If I'm not for myself, doesn't say if shani la'atzmi, if I am for myself, then who mili shani la'atzmi mani, what am I? Doesn't necessarily only. That's how we interpret it, but you can go different ways.
I also think about relationships too. I mean, you have to.
You hear at home, by the way?
About yourself and
Yeah.
have your own, you know, self-awareness.
Cannot hear,
And
can't hear it.
be able to be good in a relationship with others.
So like a connection to self, to be able to be good in a relationship.
Correct.
Yeah. This isn't for now, but I've never fully understood this part, this connection. Like, why is this necessary? If not now, when? Like, I don't know.
Don't talk about it.
Like, it seems like a different topic of the first two. Anyway, let's leave that as a question.
It's bad.
But why not? Well, do it tomorrow. I don't know why. Why'd I have to do it today?
Tomorrow.
I know, but how is that intricately connected to the first two? I don't know. Let's
I see it totally connected.
what? All right, so I'm ready. Let's not go into that because I want to get to some stories, but that's something to think about. If you, we won't get back to that, but if you, I can say we'll get back to that. We might not. All right, correct. I just think it's like that's temporal, and that's about time. This is about like the subject and the object. I don't know. All right, do not separate yourself from the community. So Hillel is very big on being like part of the community. Do not trust in yourself until the day of your death, and do not judge another until you have reached their place. It's very valuable. You don't know what other people are going through. Do not say something that cannot be understood. Trusting in the end it will be understood. Meaning, clarify what you're trying to say. And say not, when will I have time? When I have a leisure, I shall study, because you will not. Maybe you will not have leisure. Oh, when I get around to it, I'll go study. When I get older, when I finally retire, I'll go to a class. No, go learn now. Yeah, if not now, when? Okay, so correct. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just trying to figure out. All right.
There are many parallels between both of
Yeah.
those two sections.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. So he points out in his book, Talishkin, he says, that's the big difference between Hillel and Jesus. He says Jesus never really talked about studying, and Hillel doesn't always talk about like prayer or like simple faith without scholarship or learning. And so he says that's like a difference. A lot of his texts talk a lot about studying and learning. So a Brute is not sin-fearing, nor is an ignorant person pious, nor can a timid person learn, right? Nor can an impatient person teach. We're going to see that Hillel was very patient. Nor will someone who engages too much in business become wise. In a place where there's no people, strive to be a person. Yeah, so that's a beautiful statement. We're going to see, I think it's all, what I'm trying to show you is like he's multifaceted, Hillel. But oftentimes when we hear about Hillel, if you mention Hillel's name, what's the first like trait that comes to your mind without all this? The first trait from your knowledge, what? Okay, well, thanks.
Hanging
What?
outside the basement.
So what's a trait? That common trait that comes to your mind when you think about Hillel. The classic portrayal of Hillel. Yeah, like he's connected to the people, he's kind, he's generous, he's patient, right? There are multiple sides to him, and we're going to try to highlight some of them. Yeah, on one foot. You were going to see that. And he didn't push them away. He accepted. Yeah, we're going to see that. We're going to get to that. All right, so that's going to be my thesis today. Like Hillel is multifaceted, and specifically I want to highlight an aspect that plays alongside this aspect of kindness of Hillel, and I'm going to see how they play along with each other. I'm not going to give it away yet, but just don't read the title. Okay. Moreover, he saw a skull floating on the face of the water. He said to it, "Because you drowned others, they drowned you. In the end, they that drowned you will be drowned." So a kind of interesting statement of Hillel. Someone saw what goes around comes around, basically. I wrote a book on Pirkei Avot, and when I wrote this, I thought of an idea with Hillel. Maybe he was thinking about like the vicious cycle of life, where it's like he's reflecting. He's at like a body of water, and he sees a skull. He's like, "Man, this world is so sad. One person's just going after another, and that person's killing the next person." And perhaps he was thinking like, "Hey, unless we stop the cycle, it's going to keep going like this." So maybe it's a reflection on the sad state of reality, perhaps. Okay, so that's those are some statements. So we have self-assured. We have somebody who's about learning's important. He's very important about doing things and now doing them now. Loving, patient, not judgmental. We're going to see a lot of these traits embodied in the stories connected to Hillel. So here's a classic story. This story, my kids like me to tell this. Like I've told it to them many times, and it makes them fall asleep, which is a good thing. Like they like it so much that like it helps them fall asleep. So so this is a great story. It says so we're going to start out. This is still the introduction. This is Hillel's humble beginning. So Hillel is not a convert, but he is an immigrant. He came from Babylon to Israel, and also he was very poor in the beginning, like extremely poor. And so those two components are going to play into some of the stories going forward. So, the poor, the rich, the wicked come before the heavenly court. They say so I'm on page in your handouts, page 15. The rabbis taught the poor, the rich, the wicked come before the heavenly court. They say to the poor, have you not occupied yourself with the Torah? If he says, I was poor and worried about my sustenance, they would say to him, were you poorer than Hillel? Right? It's like, I don't have money. I have to worry about making a living. Or yeah. Somebody's, let's mute everybody here. Somebody want to say something on Zoom aside from, was that like, okay.
Sorry, I coughed.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Hi, Larry. If you want attention, you could just, raise your hand or something else. You don't have to your throat. All right. Okay. All right. I'm going to mute you. But if you want to mute yourself, let me know. Okay. So people, there's all kinds of reasons why excuses for not learning. But if you're going to use the excuse that you're poor, it's not a great excuse. If you're going to use the excuse that you're too much money and you couldn't do it, you're too busy with work, it's not a good excuse. And also, similarly, if you're too wicked, I'll never be accepted back, there's also an answer to that. So this is the answer to someone who says, I didn't have enough money. Is it recorded about Hillel the elder that every day he used to work in or one tropate, a certain amount of money, half of which he would give to the guard at the house of learning, the other half being spent for his food and for that of his family. Okay, so he lived day to day. He'd go to work, he'd have enough money to spend for his family. The other half he'd give to the base of Midrash to learn. He was a stick gatherer, like he is a wood cutter or wood gatherer. That was his profession. Very poor in the beginning. Obviously, once he became a big rabbi, I'm sure he did fine. He drove a Maserati or something.
Sure.
So one day he found nothing to earn. Okay, and the guard of the house would not permit him to enter. So he came home. It's Friday afternoon, and he came home. He didn't have enough. He didn't earn enough money, so he I guess he had to maybe give half. That little half that he gave to his family. He didn't have money to get into the base of Midrash. So he climbed up, and I guess he went home. I'm imagining he went home to eat for Shabbos dinner. This happens Shabbat night, Friday night. So he didn't have enough money to get in Friday. He goes home probably to eat dinner. He goes back, and he's not allowed in. What's interesting about Hillel, eventually he removed this principle of having to pay to get in the Beit Midrash. It's like our class; it's free. No, but it's like our shul. There's no dues. No, just joking. But like he took that away. But at the time he couldn't get in. So what did he do? He was poor. But he didn't give up. Instead, he climbed up and sat upon the window. So it's a picture of what it might have looked like. But I imagine there's other. I imagine him kind of sitting on top of like a window above, like laying on top of it. You're going to see the story come. It works out better with the story. So he climbed up and sat upon the window to hear the words of the living God from the mouth of Shmai and of Talyon. They were converts. Shmai and Talyon. They were his teachers. We're thinking about that in his story with the converts that come to him. Okay, putting that out there already. We're going to see the story in a bit. So they say that day was the eve of Shabbat. Erev Shabbat in the winter solstice, and the snow fell down upon him from heaven. It's a very interesting story. He's in Jerusalem, and is there a lot of snow in Jerusalem? No, there's not a lot of snow in Jerusalem.
There's some there.
Yeah, so this is not some. This is apparently 4.5 feet or so of snow. So
Been in You've been in Israel, you know it snows in Yerushalayim.
Not this much, at 4.5 feet. Just happened that it snowed that night. Okay, so in his book, Yosef Chalushkin writes in his book, he says, he says maybe not every single detail is 100% historical. I'm not saying. I'm saying he says this, but he says that they don't write stories like this about you and me. So, but anyway, but like we're gonna go with just trying to get to the bottom of the story, and take it as literally as we can. So, well, yeah, all the stories are written in a later period too. So we don't even remember what happened about stories like a few weeks ago, and we have them recorded and all kinds of things. So it's hard probably to remember every single detail, but I'm going to try to take it as little as possible. So that they said, okay, so Erev Shabbat, it was snowing, and when the dawn rose, Shemaina said to Avtalion, brother Avtalion, on every day this house is light, and today is dark. So they come in the morning. They come into daven in the morning, and it was dark in the base of Midrash. They couldn't see. They wanted to daven. It's like so dark in here. Why is it so dark? Did somebody forget to light the lamp? No, the lamps are lit. And they looked up, and they went up, and they looked up, and they saw a figure of a man in the window. Okay, so Hillel was learning Torah all night, and eventually he fell asleep, and he was covered with all the snow underneath, and his body was just on the window, top of the window, with all the snow piled on top of him. He was trying to learn the Torah. They went up and found him covered by 3 cubits of snow, which is 4.5 inches or so. They removed him 4.5 feet. Sorry, they removed him. 4.5. Yeah. They removed him, bathed, and anointed him, and placed him opposite the fire. And they said, "This man deserves that the Sabbath be profaned on his behalf." So they removed him. They lit a fire, which is forbidden on Shabbat, but they needed to save him, and so he would be able to live. And they says he was worthy to transgress Shabbat to save him. So this story has a few components that are worth thinking about. Number one, these great scholars who he admired, they did chesed with him, and they basically saved his life. He learned from converts, which is something we're going to think about. Also, he is very in love with Torah, very passionate about his Torah learning, and he was very poor, very humble and poor beginnings. And we see here his passion, his love, and his desire to keep growing and to keep becoming a better person. So that's some reflections I have on this story. Anybody have any reflections on this story? Something that stands out when we were reading it? Okay, so that's that story. Just a little bit about its beginning. Now, this is the section we're going to talk about Hillel's kindness and his generosity, and then we're going to go to a different topic. But there's a bunch of stories that connect to his patience, his kindness, and his generosity. So this is Hillel. Lending what is sufficient for your needs. If someone's poor, you have to help. If someone was once wealthy and they became impoverished and they ask you for a loan or they ask you for a handout, you should try to help them. And if they're used to a certain standard of living, if you can enable them to not have to be demoted that much that they won't be able to benefit in the same way that they did before, you should try to help them in that way. So if somebody is used to having certain luxuries, you should try to help them in a way so they don't feel that destitute or that sad, and try to provide them if you can. So this is the case.
What about poor slave?
We'll get to that. Our rabbis taught sufficient for his need. You are commanded to maintain him, but you are not commanded to make him rich. In that which he wants, includes even a horse to ride upon, a slave to run before him. Let's see. It was laid above the Hillel the elder that he hired for a certain poor man who was of a good family, a horse to ride upon, and a slave to run before him. Okay, there was a servant, we'll say a servant, and a horse that he hired for him because he was used to having that. So he hired that for him. This guy was poor, and he wanted to help him, make him feel good. One occasion, he could not find a slave or a servant to run before this individual, and so Hillel himself ran before him with the horse for 3 miles. Okay, so there's a certain sensitivity, a certain selflessness from the side of Hillel. Okay, we're going to see a lot of these texts. Seem to point to.
It was about 80 at that time.
Let's think. Yeah, you're right. Well, no, it could have been he was learning from the rabbis at the time.
60.
It could have been 40,
42.
45, 41, 42, 45. Okay. 3 miles for a 44-year-old is also difficult. Okay. Okay, so that's one text, kind of shows his sensitivity, his kindness, his selflessness, really. So here's another text which shows it's also a favorite text. This is a wager that was made. It's a classic text. Who knows this text about the wager? Okay, good. That's great. Okay, this is a very wonderful text. I love this text. I've told this story like at middle school when they have like a middle school gathering here. I've told the story to a lot of different kids in different settings. It's a great story, and to adults. Okay, so the rabbis taught a man should always be gentle like Hillel and not impatient like Shammai. He should be gentle like Hillel. And we're going to see Hillel's how extremely gentle he was. We're going to see that these kids try to make him angry. There's a wager to see if they can make him angry. And this reminds me of a story. I had this Rav, his name was Rav Horev. I learned with him. I didn't learn with him, but I used to attend his synagogue in Israel. And he was a genius. He had a phenomenal memory. He remembered the whole Talmud. But really, like he would quote you a source in Talmud, and he would bring you all the other parallels. And so the kids had this game in his yeshiva where they would call him up late at night every once in a while and try and ask him for a source and say a source. Where is it? Where can you find this in the Talmud? Like Bechorot 9a, Yevamos 72b, and so they had like a little. They try to play around with him. So these kids were trying to play around with Hillel in an even worse way. And so it says like this. It once happened that two men. This is from the Gemara, Shabbat, a classic, like a central Talmudic text, Tractate Shabbat. Once two men made a wager with each other, saying, "He who goes and makes Hillel angry shall receive 400 zuz." You know how much 400 zuz is? What costs 2 zuz?
A goat.
A goat. It bought a goat. Chad Gadya bought a goat with 2 zuz, so it's at least 200 goats, however much that is. That's a lot, right? Okay, so. The day was Shabbat. Okay, it was Erev Shabbat. Erev Shabbat. It's a kind of a busy time, right? In religious homes, ever seen people getting ready for Shabbat? It gets kind of crazy, right? So Hillel's getting ready for Shabbat. So he's washing his head. He's in the shower. Okay, he went, and so the kid. So so one of the kids says, "I'm going to go and make him angry." I'm going to make him angry. So it was Erev Shabbat. He passed by the door of his house. The guy who said, "I'm going to make Hillel angry." Hillel's in the shower, and he goes, "Is Hillel here? Is Hillel here?" So I think off the bat, he's not calling him Rabbi Hillel. He's like, Hillel, like Eli or Mitchell. I don't know, just calling out by the first name. Are you here? And so Hillel could have been annoyed, right? It's a very busy time. I mean, he's probably getting ready for Shabbos. He's at the table. He's got to go give his drasha in the shul. But immediately he robes. He gets out, and he gets out. He goes, "My son, what do you need?" Bini, my son, talking about his son. He doesn't know. I don't know if he knows the guy. Maybe he does. I don't know. Doesn't say. He goes, "I have a question to ask." The kid asks, "I have a question to ask." So Hillel's like, "Ask, my son, Bini, ask." So he goes, thereupon he asks, "Why are the heads of the Babylonians round?" Okay, this is just what Hillel needs on Erev Shabbos. And so Hillel answers, "You've asked such a great question." Okay, because they have no skillful midwives. Okay, what does that mean? So their heads are round because the midwives, when they were taking out the babies, they pulled them out. That's how Hillel's answer. Maybe he's answering with a funny answer also to dismiss him, maybe. But exactly correct. So some say it's a dig at Hillel, trying to make fun of the Babylonians. You're from Babylonia. You're from. So he's trying to make fun of that, making fun of Babylonians. Yeah, he's from there. Hillel's from Babylonia. So maybe he's saying your head's round, but Hillel's not worried about it. So Hillel goes back into his shower. By the way, this is probably the longest recorded shower in the Talmud. Okay, because there's going to be a few times. He departed, tired a while, returned and called out, "Is Hillel here? Hillel!" He robed, got out of the shower, came back to "My son. What do you need? What do you need? I have a question to ask." Ask my son. He asks, "Why are the eyes of the Palmyreans bleared? Like, why are their eyes squinted?" So he says, "My son, you've asked a great question. Because they live in sandy places." Okay. Answers. Okay. So some say that these Palmyreans, they were also wood collectors and cutters. So he's trying to make a dig at him again. I forget what the third one was. It's also a dig, but I forget what it was.
No, they all had thyroid, eye disease.
All right, third attempt. Again, well, guess what happens? He goes back to the shower. He comes out. Hello, my son, Bini. I have a question to ask. Ask my son. I think this is the idea. Love God's creatures and bring them close to Torah. If you really, really love them, you continuously bring them close to Torah. If you look at them like your children, like your family. Yes, why are the feet of the Africans, meaning this looks funny, but like if you ever think about your children or your grandchildren, they might be annoying at times, but like you're going to think about them differently than some other kids. He saw everybody as his children. Why are the feet of the Africans wide? My son, you've asked a great question, because they live in watery marshes. Okay, so that's that. Now the fourth attempt was, I have many questions to ask, but fear that you may become angry. So he's like, no, he's trying to like, he didn't get angry over any of this stuff. So so he says, I have 100 more questions. I'm afraid you're going to get angry. Perhaps you, at that point, be like, oh, this guy, get him out of my face. But he didn't do that. He says, thereopon he robed. He sat before him and said, ask all the questions you have to ask. So he asked him the question. He goes, are you Hillel, who is called the Nasi of Israel? Hillel says, yes. If that is you, may there not be many more like you in Israel. Why, my son? Still calling him his son. He says, because I have lost 400 Jews through you. You made me lose all my money. I couldn't get you angry. And then he ends up angry, right? It's interesting. Be careful of your moods, he said. Hillel is worth it that you should lose 400 Jews and yet another 400 Jews through him. Yet Hillel should not lose his temper. So it's very interesting. He's worth it that you should lose 400 Jews and yet another 400 Jews, but he will not lose his temper. Okay, so that's that story. So it's very interesting. The Mesilat Yesharim, who's a Rav Chaim Moshe Luzzatto, was in the beginning of the 18th century, one of our central works in Jewish ethics, the Mesilat Yesharim. He used Hillel as a paradigm to say that the highest level is to not get angry at all. It's like if you can get to a place where you're not angry at all, that's the highest level. Hillel is the example. Rav Kook, who was lived the last 100 years or so, he died in 1935. He said he questioned the Mesilat Yesharim. He says maybe that's not the highest level. Highest level is that you have anger, but you channel it to the right places. Like if you're protesting against something wrong, it's not ideal to get rid of your anger altogether. So there's debate around that. But at least you see that this is a very high level. So that's that story. Right afterwards is another story about 3 conversion stories.
And Rabbi,
Yeah.
the unbelievable attribute of patience.
Patience,
Can you
yeah.
imagine how much patience?
Correct.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Aaron Chavez.
Incredible patience.
And
Correct. It's
Wouldn't you?
told my wife.
your wife.
For
All right. So the next story is a classic story about conversion, and we have this story and this and like 2 other stories here in this part of the kindness. The conversion stories are very interesting as well. Again, we mentioned that Hillel's teachers were converts. Hillel was very friendly to these converts. So we saw he was very friendly to Jews, called B'ni, right? But he's also very friendly to non-Jew who wants to convert to Judaism. And we're going to think, when we read this story, think a little bit about modern day conversion practices and see in your mind if this aligns with it or not. Okay, that's going to bring us, if we have time, hopefully we'll get to Joseph Telushkin at the end, and he talks about that a little bit. Okay, so I want to skip over the first one just for lack of time, but let's go to this one. The first one is someone comes to Hillel. Let's just read it. Our rabbi said it once happened, a non-Jew came before Shammai. Okay, Shammai was the opposite of Hillel. Shammai was a tough guy. Okay, he was a tough cookie. And so he didn't mess around. He's very literal in his interpretations, and he's very strict. So he comes up to a potential convert. A non-Jew says, how many Torahs do you have? Shammai responded, 2, a written Torah and an oral Torah. The non-Jew replied, I believe you about the written one, but not about the oral one. Convert me on condition that you will teach me only the written one. So if somebody came up to a Beis Din today and said that, okay, see you later. No, we're not going to convert you. Shammai scolded him and kicked him out with the rebuke. We might not do that, but that's what he did. The same convert came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him. Whoa. On the first day, Hillel taught him Aleph, Bes, Gimel, Dalet. The next day, reversed the order. The convert said, but yesterday you didn't say it like that. Hillel then replied, so you were trusting me about what I taught you yesterday? Then you should trust about the oral Torah as well. Very interesting. Hillel's trusting that this gentleman, Tosfos says this, Hillel's trusting that this gentleman has potential to grow into acceptance of all the mitzvot. So he's willing to accept him, even though he didn't really understand Aleph Bet at the time. Very different than our practices today. Our practice today with conversion is that if you don't even know the Aleph Bet, or if you don't believe in the oral Torah, you're not even going to get in the door to become a convert. We would sit with you if you did and you were open to learning. We would learn with you for a pretty long time, like a year or so, and you get to know the bait. You know brachas, you know Shabbos, you know kashrus, and then we'd accept you to be a convert. But Hillel seemed to have not such not such a high bar for letting you to become a convert. He trusted that this individual would learn, and it turned out that they did. On another occasion, a certain heathen came before Shammai and said to him, "Make me a proselyte on the condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot." That would be such a chutzpahdik thing for someone to come to us and say, I want you to convert me, but on the condition, they're setting for the rabbi's conditions. On the condition, I'll convert. I'll do you a favor. I'll convert if you teach me all the Torah on one foot. So Shammai repulsed him with the builder's cubit, which was in his hand. He was holding a cubit, which like a ruler that he would for measuring. And some say that he specifically used a ruler because he says it's not. Everything's about specifics and details, about measurements. And you're telling me just everything on one foot. There's a lot of details.
Were pieces of wood of a certain length. They didn't have.
Yeah. But it was a measurement. So you would measure things based on that. So say he just pushed him away with it. So he went before Hillel, and guess what? Hillel wasn't bothered by that. Hillel says he answered him on one foot. What was the answer? He says, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is the whole Torah. While the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Whoa, that's such an interesting statement, right? Number one. He doesn't say love your neighbors yourself. He says, what is hateful to you, do not do as do to your neighbor. It's a little bit different, the language. Also, that's the whole Torah. Is that the whole Torah? Isn't there tefillin? Isn't there matzah? Isn't there tzitzis? Like, is that the whole Torah?
Physical manifestations to
Of
get
loving?
you
To loving others?
to everything. Yes, to loving God, to loving others.
It's very interesting. So Hillel obviously knew all the laws. He was very careful. There's discussions about him and discussions around the Paschal offering. Like he knows all the halachas. He does all the laws. But he's saying this is the centerpiece of it all. And he frames it in unique language. Not do unto others as you not want done unto yourself. It's not love your neighbor as yourself. Which one?
Do not do unto others that you would not.
Not just about love.
That is a lot harder to go ahead and love your enemy, or to be able to go ahead and strike do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Oh, gee, that's nice. That's lovely. So you're going to bake a cake and you're going to bring it over.
You're saying, okay.
But the other way around.
Okay, I was talking, so that's true as well. I was also saying, like, he's not saying love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbi Akiva used that as like the slogan of Judaism.
He goes on to say in the last sentence, while the rest is the commentary, go and learn it. So go read the rest for yourself.
Correct. So Joseph Telushkin talks about that, where he is strong. We saw Hillel has a strong emphasis on learning. So he's also saying go and learn. But it's very interesting. He's promoting this as the center. That's a central teaching. I also think Joseph Telushkin says that it's not. He wanted to give something tangible. Love your neighbor as yourself. What does that mean? What does that mean? It's love. But how do you do it in practice? This is how you do it. Think about what bothers you, and don't do that to somebody else. I'm already going to go a little entryway into the next part of our talk. I think he starts here with the self. We saw he has a lot of statements on the self in Pirkei Avot, and we're going to see he's very selfless, but he has a strong sense of self, and we're going to see that in the upcoming stories. I think it's hinted to in his central statement. What it starts from yourself. What if you think you deserve to be talked down to. So then obviously he's not saying you should talk down to somebody. So he's saying you have a strong sense of self, and if you have a strong sense of self, you will not do those things that you find despicable to somebody else. So we see in his words, he's starting from the self, and I think that's going to be very important for the upcoming text. These are selfless texts, but Hillel is something. His whole persona is something much broader than that. I think it includes him having a strong sense of self. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. So he says, on another occasion, it happened, a certain heathen said to himself, I'll go become a proselyte, I'll go convert, so I'll become a high priest. He went before Shammai, and guess what Shammai said? He pushed him away with the builder's cubit. He went before Hillel, and he made him a convert. He said, can any man be made a king, but he who knows the arts of government? Do go and study the arts of government. So he says, if you want to become a Kohen Gadol, you have to know how to become a high priest. He converted him. But I guess he believed that this individual will be able to become Jewish. He would learn and do the right thing. Meaning, and so he goes, go and learn about it. So he went and learned about becoming a high priest. He went and read, and he came in, and the stranger that approaches shall be put to death. Meaning someone who's not as on page 18. I'll just tell you what it says inside. He says, basically, it says that you can't, only a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, can wear the high priest clothing. And he realizes he's not a high priest. And so he was born as a convert, not a high priest. So therefore, he went through his learning. He learned it. Hillel didn't have to teach him. He learned it on his own. And so Hillel encouraged him. He helped him become Jewish, and he believed that he would learn on his own. He'd come on, enter into the right path, and he did. And so he says like this. Then this convert went to Shammai and said to him, am I then eligible to be high priest? It is not written in the Torah that the stranger that approaches shall be put to death. Someone is not a high priest. He then went before Hillel and said to him, O gentle Hillel, blessings rest on your head for bringing me under the wings of the Shekhinah. Sometime later, the three met in one place, and they said, Shammai's impatience sought to drive us from the world, but Hillel's gentleness brought us under the wings of the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is God's presence. So that's why this is the whole Gemara. It started with you should always be gentle like Hillel and not impatient or mean like Shammai. And this is why, because Shammai pushed these individuals away. Hillel accepted them, was open to them, and enabled them to come into Judaism. And in the end, they ended up being law-abiding, God-fearing Jews. So we see the bracha to the nation. So this is not the approach that's accepted practically today when it comes to converts. Today we have another text in Bechorot that says if someone comes into Judaism saying, I'll accept all the Torah except for one law, we don't accept them. You have to accept all of the commandments. And so the question is, you have to accept them or you have to know all of them? You have to accept them overall, or you have to know as much as you can in order to accept it. There's a little bit of debate around that, but you have to accept, you can't say, I'm going to accept only the written Torah, not the oral Torah. But Hillel's attitude was one of openness, of embrace to converts as well. So Joseph Tushman is going to say, in the last source that I have here, he says that's one of the four things today that we can take from Hillel, being a little bit more kind and welcoming to converts. He says that should be something that we, in the initial stages as well. I would say these other three are things that I think could easily be applied to Orthodoxy. This one is, it's kind of embedded our kind of difficult to shift out of that mode within Orthodoxy. I think it's going the other way, actually. We're getting stricter and stricter in terms of the conditions to become a convert. But it's very interesting. Some have used Hillel's, like Rav Uziel, he brings in his text, like other rabbis throughout the generations have used Hillel's approach, in Israel with a lot of the Russians who came over, like thousands and thousands of Russians who came over, and the details of their past are like kind of unclear, but they were claiming that they're Jews, obviously, and they enabled them to convert, even though they knew that they would not be fully observant, kind of based on this Hillel model of through time they'll learn and they'll become more observant. So, yeah.
Rabbi.
One second, Sherry.
I'm sorry.
Having more faith in people, and don't put the stumbling blocks before before them, and have the faith that they will be able to do things. Because I think it's just a different approach to your belief in
Humanity,
the
yeah.
essence of humans.
Yeah. Someone's gonna say something, Ben?
Yeah, it's similarly, it seems like he gives everybody the benefit of the doubt, sees everybody the best light. So it seems to me like he probably knew some of these questions people were egging him on or testing him. But it seems like he, again, tried to just take them seriously and answer them in a way that potentially could be a serious answer to their question.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just say, like, the practical halacha is like not so much like that thing within Orthodox circles, but just those things points out that there should be more openness in his opinion. We're going to see a few other statements that he has, but I want to move now to I want to skip over these two next sources to kind of talk about the next part of our source here, which is on page 19. Hillel was appointed as the Nasi. He was a central leader in our nation. There's a story here, an origin story of how he became the president or the head of the head leader in Am Yisrael. But to be a head leader, you have to have some gusto. You have to have some. You have to have a certain standing and an internal strength. And so, on one hand, he was selfless. On the other hand, he was a central leader in our nation. That's pointed out in this text. This text, he kind of, and also his scholarship is also highlighted. So this is what happened. The 14th of Nisan once occurred on Shabbat. They forgot and did not know whether the Pesach offering can be brought on Shabbat or not. Okay, they didn't know. And the sons of Betera were in charge at the time. They said, "Is there any person who knows the Pesach overrides Shabbat or not?" They said to them, "There's a certain man in Jerusalem who came up from Babylonia. And Hillel of Babylonian is his name. At one point, he served the two most eminent scholars of his generation, Shemaiah and Avtalion. He certainly knows whether that's the halacha or not." The sons of Betera sent messengers to call for him. They said to him, "Do you know whether it overrides Shabbat or not?" He said to them, Have we only one Paschal lamb during the year that overrides Shabbat?" I mean, there's many sacrifices that we do on Shabbat. So he's saying he knows the halachot, and he's saying we do this a lot on Shabbat. Sacrifices we do on Shabbat, like the Musaf sacrifice. So he's saying that we have many more than 200 Paschal lambs to sacrifice during the year that override Shabbat. Don't we have that many? We have many more. So he said we should do it on Shabbat. It overrides. And they saw that he had like great knowledge and he had great confidence to voice his opinion in front of everybody. And so therefore, they seated him at head and appointed him Nasi over them. And he expounded the laws of Passover that entire day. That's how he became the Nasi. What I want to point out by this is that he is he's like a leader with confidence, with strength. And that doesn't always, and we're going to try to reconcile this with the other components of his personality, which are very kind, gentle, and very patient. So here's another text, which is like one of his main halachic contributions, the prose bowl. We're not going to go over that right now, but I want to show with this that he enacted many laws as well. He was confident, and he stood up against the trend to enact these laws. I mean, he had some inner strength as well. He wasn't just passive, like patient, kind person, but he also was a strong person who stood up and paskin even against the trend. So here's a text which talks about Hillel. Hillel talks about himself as in a seemingly like haughty way. Seemingly, he says like this. It is taught in the Tosefta. They said about Hillel the Elul that when he was rejoicing at the celebration of the place of the drawing of water, on Sukkot they had a celebration called Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the celebrating the drawing of the water. He used to say, "If I'm here, Hakol Kan, Imani Kan, Hakol Kan. If I'm here, everything's here. Everyone's here. And if I'm not here, who is here?" Right? It's a little bit like, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Something like. So you see here that Hillel saying. Question: what is Hillel saying actually? It's like, I'm here, the party started. What is he saying actually? So there's different interpretations to this, but on a simple level, they say here, in other words, one must consider himself as one upon whom it is incumbent to fulfill obligations. He must not rely on others to do so. I mean, he got there, he's like, I'm going to celebrate. If I'm here, everything's here. Even if other people aren't happy, I'm going to make the best out of it. But there is a certain statement, the ability to say, if I'm here, everything's here. It takes a certain sense of self to be able to make that statement, no matter what you meant. So I heard a nice explanation of this It's gonna go to 8:05, if that's okay. I heard a nice explanation of this by Rabbi Furman, our high school teacher, and he teaches Daf Yomi in our shul. He says, if I'm here, everything's here. If you're present in the moment, everything's there for you. If I'm here, if I'm present at this, sometimes you go to shul or you go to celebrations and nobody is excited, or perhaps people come out and they didn't experience it the same way as you did. They weren't as entertained or elated or excited. Well, if you were there, if you were present, then everything was there. You can make it what you make it. So I thought that was a beautiful idea.
But it's also, you can make it for other people. It's almost like being
Everything's here if I make it the best out of it.
Right.
So again, that's I think this points to like a certain sense of self, certain sense of your ability to impact. So I think this text indicates that as well.
Don't go through the motions.
Don't go through the motions. Yeah, like that's similar to if I'm not for myself, who will be for me, right? So that's the text I brought here.
Yeah, I thought of it as the tree falls in the forest, somebody has to be there to hear it. So you have to, the same idea, you have to be there to be present.
So I think, so when we think about Hillel, people often think about him as a passive, nice, gentle individual, which is true. That's part of his personality. This is highlighted in his central text. So going back to our text when he talked about how do I sum up Judaism? What you don't like done to yourself, don't do it to others. It starts from yourself. Similarly here, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? His statement on being for other people starts with himself. If I'm not for myself, who is for me? I have to be for myself first. And then if I'm only for myself, what am I? Then I have to be for others. And if not now, when? So all these texts point to a strong sense of self. And I think it's very valuable, very important to think about. If you want to be on Hillel's level, that's great. But don't skip stages. For Hillel to get to that place of being selfless, he had to have a strong sense of self and know his boundaries, know what he was able to do, and know when he would be pushed. Knew when he would be becoming a pushover. For him to extend himself and say, "My son, ask all your questions," that wasn't him being a pushover. He knew what he was able to do. He knew his abilities, he knew his boundaries, and from that place, you could be as kind as you want to other people. But if you lose yourself along the way, that's definitely a negative thing, and I don't think that's who Hillel was.
People ask you to do things all the time. You always say yes. And you
Yeah.
never say no. You're not taking care of yourself. So eventually you're going to have to say no to something because you're not well enough to do what you said you were going to do.
Correct. And so I think that's the strong message of Hillel. Like the text highlight how kind and nice he was. I think he was able to do that in a sustainable way because he had a strong sense of self. He was able to come back to that place. Here's the text I think that strengthens this. This is this text is a very interesting text, and I think that this is the source of where he got that strong sense of self. It says, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven. Like Hillel, when Hillel would go somewhere, they would ask him, where are you going? He would answer, I'm on my way to do a mitzvah. Okay. So they go, what mitzvah? I'm going to the bathroom. Oh, okay. That's not what you would have expected him to answer, right? So they said, well, and this is a mitzvah? He goes, yeah, in order to upkeep my body. Okay. Let's keep going.
There's even a bracha.
There's a bracha. No, it is a mitzvah to upkeep your body. Where are you going, Hillel, another time? I'm on my way to do a mitzvah. Which mitzvah, Hillel? I'm on my way to the bathhouse. And this is a mitzvah? Yeah, to wash my body, you see? No, it's joking. So he goes, know that this is true. Just as in the case with statues erected in the courtyards of the kings, where those appointed to wipe and scrub them are annually awarded a salira by the king, and not this alone, but they're also adorned with the grandeur of the kingship. All the more so with us who are created in the image of God. So in Shammai would say, let's perform our duties with this body. Meaning Shammai was like, let's take care of our body. It's not a mitzvah. But Hillel said, just like those individuals in the courtyard of the king who have to clean the statues that were sculpted in the image of the king, so too we were created in the image of God. So we would take care of ourselves. We take care of our body. We take care of our how things function inside of us. This is the idea. So Hillel has a strong sense of self. He loves other people, but in addition, he loves himself. Why? Because we're all created in God's image. And so this is an extreme example, I think, of him, of his self-care, of taking care of himself, and that emerged from his love for God and his connection to God, and from seeing himself as an extension of godliness, that he has godliness inside of him. So I think that's like how you could tie all the stories together in one way to tie them together. This is the way I'm tying them together. Others tie it together in different ways. Another way to tie together the stories is to say a lot of these stories point to a lot of his stories point to his like humble beginnings. Like Hillel he was poor in the beginning, and people took care of him, and so he understands the plight of those who are poor. He understands the plight of those who are in need. He was an immigrant, and those kids made fun of him for being a Babylonian. So he knew how to take care of other people because he went through that as well. But I'm highlighting another aspect, that he had a strong sense of self, and from that strong sense of self, he was able to extend himself in a very extreme way to help other people. Sometimes if you extend yourself beyond yourself, you don't have that stability, you can lose yourself. And I don't think that's what Hillel did. That's why he's able to do it for so many years. So this is one final idea I want to share with you. One final piece I want to share with you is this is Telushkin's, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin's reflections on Hillel for our day. Okay, so his reflections are says like this: these 4 brief examples, insisting that ethics is the essence of Jewish religiosity. So very interesting. In this book, he says, let's say someone said to you, this individual, she learns, she takes off challah, she davens, but she's really an unethical person. She steals, and you probably say she's religious, but she's not ethical. In Orthodox circles, that would be said. Observant, yeah. But Hillel would say something like this. He would say the list would be different. Are they kind? Do they speak lashon hara? All these questions, like interpersonal questions, and those would be in the list of are they religious or not. Hillel highlighted the ethics. I mean, his language here is even better than what I offered. Let me just read one piece of this to you. He says like this. Is so-and-so religious? Oh, definitely. How do you know? Because he's very careful never to embarrass anyone, particularly in public, and he always judges other people fairly. That's how Hillel would define religiosity. Of course, Hillel did all the halachot, all the laws, but how you define it would be different for Hillel. He says we need that today. Sometimes we get overly scrupulous, and we define religion strictly in terms of abiding by the laws. And we should take these factors, ethical factors, when he explained what is Judaism, that's how that is. What is bad to you, don't do to others. That's how he summed it up. And so he says that should be a central thing to think about today. Maintaining openness and receptivity to non-Jews who wish to convert. We can learn that from Hillel. Advancing the exclusion of mean-tempered, volatile, and verbally abusive people from the teaching profession. Right. So he says somebody who's strict can't teach. He says that in a Pirkei Avot, in a statement, and he shows a lot of people. There's a phenomenon in Baltimore in the Orthodox community where people who were learned in earlier years in strict yeshivas are burnt out at this point. The educators were mean to them. Maybe a lot of us have experienced that in different time periods. The teachers were not even tempered. They weren't kind. They weren't sensitive. They didn't give them their space. They didn't allow them to develop themselves like Hillel did with the converts or with the children, B'ni, that came to visit him. And that can really push people away. He says, today we need that, and we can learn that from Hillel. So lastly, utilizing the notion of tikkun olam to root out any unfairness or unintended cruelty in Jewish law. So Hillel was also careful in Jewish law to undo different things or to interpret things in a different way to enable the concept of tikkun olam, the betterment of the world, to play out in Jewish law. And so you can go through this and see a little bit. He describes a little bit more. The last few chapters are very strong in this book. He's saying basically we need Hillel today. People don't talk about Hillel that much as a role model. He's one of our biggest rabbis. So he says he should be in the mix of the rabbis we're thinking about in terms of a model for Judaism. And I think on an interpersonal level and also national level today, individually, Hillel is very valuable because we want to be as kind as we can, but we have to know our limits. Similarly, on a national level today in Israel, everything that's going on, I think this is like such a powerful message. Hillel is such a powerful message. We want to be everything for everybody. We want to be loved by everybody. of course, if I'm only for myself, who will be for me? But today, and especially today, we have to remember that if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And we're really feeling that. Like, if there aren't many people that are for us, sadly, and we must be for ourselves. And if we're not for ourselves, we will not be able to manifest any of the things we want to do for the world, to help other people, to spread our message. So these components are, I think, are things we need to think about on an individual and a national level as well.